press start, and I'll announce you in. Hello and welcome to Commsverse. This session is what we learned from benchmarking 5,300 Microsoft Teams with presenters Luke Sinclair and Coco Molina from Swoop Analytics. Over to you.
Thanks, Randy. Okay, hi everyone. Good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are. Welcome to this session, which we're going to talk about what we learned from benchmarking 5,300 Microsoft Teams, what we think is the world's first most comprehensive benchmarking study of the Teams application. We're going to start with, the standard. Well, hang on. Thanks to the sponsors. Wow, look at them all. Awesome to see so many great organizations helping us out and making Commsverse a possibility. Please do drop by our booth. We have a booth running in the Teams instance. Swoop team are there. We are waiting to chat to you. So that's one way you can get in touch with us if you are interested in what you hear and would like to talk more. What are we going to cover today? So we'll quickly do introductions of myself and Coco. I'm then going to talk to you sort of about some of the key insights that we found during the Swoop for Microsoft Teams benchmarking study that we completed earlier this year. I'm going to share with you some of the best and worst practices that we found in that study. Coco is going to then share with you a case study from our customer Real Foundations. And we're going to give you a quick overview of some of the key features in the Swoop for Teams application. And of course, at the end, we will have time, hopefully for a couple of questions in the chat window there. Or if not, there's the post-session breakout. You can join us and we'll join that for a few minutes afterwards if anyone wants to talk directly. Of course, you can always, get in touch with us via the contact us form on swoopanalytics.com as well. So, a little bit about me. First of all, I'm the Director of Customer Success and Growth, North America in the East region. I live about 100 miles northwest of New York City in the beautiful Hudson Valley. Actually very rainy, stormy Hudson Valley today. But originally, obviously you can hear I'm not from these parts, from Australia. I'm a First Mover Fellow at the Aspen Institute, and I've been doing this for a long time, since as long as I can remember. Actually, I've been helping organisations, build, implement, and roll out social network and collaboration tools, including most recently at American Express in downtown New York City. Coco.
Thank you, Luke. So my name is Coco Molina. Currently my role at Swoop Analytics is customer growth and customer success, North America West and Latin America. I am currently based out of the Pacific Northwest and specifically Redmond, Washington. My background is in sales and mortgage lending, and I love the ability to kind of look at things and figure out exactly how we can get things done. Having that background has given me kind of the knowledge of what connection within organizations, or the importance of connection within organizations. And in my free time, well, I like spending time with my family and friends. So what we're going to be sharing with you a little bit is a little bit of what Swoop is. And so what you're seeing here is on this screen is the Swoop dashboard. And what the Swoop dashboard does is it provides deep knowledge of what your personal contribution, as well as the performance of either your team, your business units, and of course part of across all your whole organization. It will provide you also with some of the insights that you're going to be seeing. Will provide you with actionable insights that will hopefully empower the team members to create kind of growth plans for better collaborative behaviors. The other thing that you'll have available is leaders will have the ability to measure sentiment around conversations, and that kind of stuff if your organization is really into sentiment analysis. The Swoop dashboard to the right shows you the personal dashboard. Actually, it shows you the enterprise dashboard of an organization. But the thing with Swoop is we like to provide you insights into and we give you metrics and insights down all the way down to the individual level. We know that change happens at an individual level, so we want to make sure that Swoop is available from the personal, the business segment, the teams, and all the way up to the enterprise level. Swoop uses unique personas and team personas as well to provide either the individual user or the team insights into what their collaboration style and their social networking behaviors are. It's totally based on the interaction either the individual or the team has on the platform. We have over 20 years of social network analytics experience, and we are able to package those into 30 indicators across our dashboards on our offering. We also have, Swoop has done, for the past 5 years, we've done benchmarking reports on some of the best and worst Yammer networks, as well as Teams, and also Workplace by Facebook. We work with over 100 of the world's top global brands spanning across the USA, Europe, and Asia Pacific.
Okay, so let's jump into the benchmarking of Microsoft Teams. So in early 2020, actually sort of just before the COVID-19 pandemic sort of hit, we completed the world's first benchmarking study of Microsoft Teams. We do this by mining relationships and interactions within Teams, and then we aggregate all of that data. So in the Teams report, we cover, the title of this session suggests 5,300 teams. They come from 15 organizations, and given that we were moving pretty fast this time, we also invited contributions from some of our partners to help us sort of, form a really clear picture. You can see some of them there: Adopt and Embrace, Carpool, Avanade, Engage Squared, Inesis, and WM Reply. We do a number of case studies with our customers, and this year we also invited partners to help fill in some of those stories for us, and to help tell us sort of what the best and worst practices that they were seeing as they worked with their the customers. The data that we analysed as part of the benchmarking report was actually from a 12-week period at the end of last year. So, we all know that Teams is moving very quickly. And, we're actually currently working on an addendum to this report. It's not available yet, but we have been looking at, what changes have occurred in Teams in light of COVID-19, and how has this impacted, collaboration platforms like Yammer and Teams. So let's jump on to the next one. In the study that we completed, we saw pretty much what we're calling 3 different migration lands, if you like. So you have the first, like the biggest one, the land of chat and calls. Then you have the land of meetings, which typically maps to people coming in from Skype and from the Outlook sort of space. And also the land of teaming, which is where we're actually building out those team channels. I think these are starting to become more interrelated now, but certainly in the time period that we did this assessment, they're very much used as separate functions within the Teams environment. And, we refer to these sort of 3 new lands on a new planet, if you like, where people are coming in from other worlds, a heritage application, into this sort of modern environment, but largely still doing what they did in the old location. Some people were starting to explore the new Teams environment. And we know that 70 to 95% of all the messages that were happening were in chat. But we also observed about 40% of the teams that were active enough for us to characterize the style of work they were doing in the team space. So this was really important to the piece of research. Now I know that sort of 40% doesn't seem with 60% not doing anything, 40% doesn't seem like a lot. Lost my train of thought, and that was I think that was true at the time, but it's really changing now with everyone working from home. I think these numbers will start to be a little bit different, but I think the 40% did paint a picture where people were still very much exploring the space and sort of actively using it. So within that 40%, we definitely found some pretty spectacular use cases. One thing I wanted to mention was the upper limit for teams actually went from 5,000 to 10,000. And I know that many of you listening might say, well, I'm definitely not in a team of 10,000 people. You're probably only in a team with maximum of maybe 20 or something like that. But when we think about the concept of a team, we're often thinking about people that we're meeting on a daily basis and working closely with directly, day to day. But in Microsoft Teams, we see it a bit different. And what I'm showing you here is some of the data-driven analysis that we did of the interactions within Teams. We ran some statistics as part of the report to find out what distinctive clusters existed, and we found 5 core groups. So the dominant one, obviously the 60% who are disconnected, not active, we talked about before. They had very little activity. We sort of found that they would have potentially less than 1 interaction every week. So clearly they weren't active. They weren't doing all that much. They were just exploring, taking a look around. But the other 40%, 39%, these were quite interesting. So the first group we'll talk about, the 7% at the top. They're what we're calling single leader teams. You can see the little icon to the right, which pretty much is saying this team has one dominant player who is more or less calling the shots. This is the sort of thing we experience often in our face-to-face and business as usual teams. Then you see self-directed beneath it, sitting at 13%. These are teams where there isn't a distinctive leader, and mostly people are connected with each other and doing their work sort of cooperatively in a self-directed way. And this is really, in Microsoft Teams, the aspirational team type. This is the one that if you're going to read the textbook or talk to the academics, they would say that we should aspire to be like this. And I think, we're definitely seeing this start to happen in the digital space, which I think is sort of, both interesting and good. And I think for sure in today's world, with a lot of people working from home, this is going to be the way a lot of us, really need to work in the future. Then the last two, 11 and 8%, forum and community. The forum is very much like a single leader team with a lot of people watching what's going on. They may not necessarily be forums, but the patterns that we see in the data are telling us this is how they're behaving. And the last one is community. We often relate community to Yammer, and in Teams, well, with an upper limit of 10,000, we're going to see teams like this emerging in the team space, communities emerging in the team space. They operate, I guess, a little bit like a self-directed team. They have a core group of people facilitating the community, not necessarily a single leader, but more of a community-based leadership. But again, sort of quite a group of people coming together, and often, they're simply there to learn. So, we think this is important. Clearly, if we want to be a self-directed team, but you're presenting as a community, the metrics can be quite different. So, you really need to change the way that you work if you want to achieve that sort of purpose. And it also goes the other way. So, as well as for the other types, we're certainly seeing today, we just had a look at the data in our database last week for how much the activity has increased for the period, from March to June, when we've really seen this different style of working. And it really is a very interesting time. I'm sure you all appreciate that. We're going to monitor this over time. We're seeing about 210% increase in Teams activity. And, with Yammer also, not quite as high, but a 70% increase in the amount of interactions that are happening online. And I guess, this isn't surprising because suddenly this has been thrust into the forefront. Oh, yep. So let me give you a snippet of some of the key findings in the report. As you saw, we had quite a lot of experimental groups, small, largely active groups, but we did see a big gap between what we would say the average performers and the best performers are. So we found most staff members are members of up to 3 teams, but they're mostly only active in one. So a lot of people say to us, well, I'm in way more teams than 3. And it's likely if you're listening in right now, you're probably thinking that might be the case for you too. But if you think about the sort of, study that we're doing, it's really looking at everybody in the entire company. It's across 20, 30, 40,000 people. And, when you include this many people, there's an awful lot of those people who are just in one team. They're working in one space, doing their one job. Another question we're getting from our clients is, Teams is being presented by Microsoft to us as a hub, sort of where you need to do your work and bring other applications into that space. And they're asking us to tell them to what extent is that actually happening. So when we ran the numbers, we found, almost 70% of the team sites were adding extra tabs. And I think this is actually pretty impressive given how new Teams is. And then the question obviously is, what are those tabs? So we found interestingly enough, the Excel button was by far the most popular added tab, probably twice as much as the next one after that, which was SharePoint and Planner, split about equally. We also found that overall, the majority of tabs that got added to the hub were from Office 365. There are a few external ones, and I think this will probably likely increase. People adding things, websites or PDFs, things like that. But hopefully, I think with the focus on apps within Microsoft, we might see more apps being added, and hopefully, lots of people are going to be adding the Swoop app to their teams too. And if you want to find out about that, get in touch with us. So then the last thing, sort of key finding was, we also comment on this issue of Teams versus Yammer. We've got some interesting data to share on that, and it's a question we get asked quite a lot, to be honest. I want to emphasize sort of the good things, the exceptional teams we identify as part of the benchmarking report. We go back to our clients to help them sort of understand what it is. And when we look at a team, we don't have all of the data within every post. When we look at a team, we just have the ID. We don't have their name. We don't know what they were talking about. So we usually take this and go back to our clients and we say, well, here are the IDs and some of the great self-directed teams, and here are the IDs of some wonderful communities. What can you tell us about them, and how can you, give us some feedback on what they're up to? And usually, a customer will come back to us and say, well, this team is X, Y, Z, and they do this and that. Sometimes they'll give us a little mini case study, which is ideal, and it really helps us to understand what's going on within the team. So we do know, as part of this work, a fair bit about what the great use cases are. And so for the best use cases, these are we got a range of different ones, but these are sort of the four I would say that really stood out. And I think probably this has also changed in the last couple of months, but at this particular point in time, a couple of use cases. So the first one around where the organization is monitoring something around the globe. So this tends to be something like a security team looking at intrusion, sort of issues, things like that. This has to happen around the clock. So things have to be shared. They have to store stuff in teams. So the people coming on to the next shift later in the day, they have space to consume that information. And we found, frankly, these teams were very active, and often quite large compared to many of the other teams. So I think the most active teams that we had were about 25 members, and they were posting in the team's channels on average something like once every 14 minutes. So this is, compared to a lot of teams, it's really a lot going on. The next example is onshore and offshore teams. So typically organizations, these days have some sort of offshore work, and that is, not necessarily just outsourced teams, but could be sort of peer-to-peer offshore work, working around the clock. And sometimes the offshore teams don't have full access to all the company resources. So we saw that, the Teams application was really facilitating that information sharing. The third one's global change programs. So these are programs that have to hit the whole of the company. They have to, reach all corners. And so we saw a number of examples where, Office 365 is a good example of this. It's sort of like any major program that impacts the whole organization, whether it's health and safety or sustainability, they sort of fit into this space, and that was really a best use case. And then the fourth one, internal, external project teams. So, a lot of big organizations try to block this, but, we've seen in the data that there's a lot of value in people who are able to run a team externally, on their own tenant, and have partners, clients sort of collaborating with them, and at the same time having access to their own internal resources as well. So I think the fourth one is really a growth area for teams, and if people can be convinced not to block the external access, I think there'll be a lot of value seen in working with their partners. The one thing to say is, of all the use cases, a lot of them in this time period, like the end of last year, they were necessarily virtual. So part of our research in updating the benchmarking report with the COVID-19 sort of period is to really understand, now that everyone is necessarily virtual, what do the best use cases look like, and how are teams using Teams? So just the link there. If you want to go and download the full report, I highly recommend it. You can jump over. I've got, actually, at the end of the presentation, we've got a QR code that links you to that page. But if you go over there, it's there. It's available for free. It's a pretty big document. I think it's about 90 pages, so it's pretty serious. But if you're interested in this, what we found, you will find it very interesting. So here are some of the emerging worst practices, and this is something that, some people, I guess, feel a little bit uncomfortable about, but we found that people really do resonate with not only the good things, but also, hearing what the worst practices are as well. So the top one was around over-formalizing the rollout of teams. Typically, if part of your organization's role is to introduce enterprise software, the typical structure is they might be introduced by the IT department, and they might have sort of, they might roll it out department by department. They might have sort of comprehensive training program where everyone gets trained on it, and they do that before it gets rolled out. Well, our partners who are working with clients are saying this is not the right way to do it with Teams. It should allow for a little bit of experimentation, and it shouldn't be overly structured or formalized. Otherwise, you just get tied down. And what they found was that even training becomes very technical, so it's not contextual. You're not getting you're not getting sort of, what does this mean for me in the context of what I'm trying to do? So really important to sort of rethink, reimagine how you are rolling the tool out. The second thing is sort of related, and they're saying, don't let the IT department dictate how to use Teams. So usually this isn't something that IT departments necessarily want to do. It usually happens when the organization hasn't taken real ownership of Teams and how it's used, and then it's left to IT to sort of figure that out. And our partners observed in their work that when it's left to IT to do the job, they usually recommend things that are going to reduce the number of support calls. So, good to make sure that you're not just leaving it to IT. The third point is don't replicate what you already have in other places. So it's easy to jump in here and set it up exactly how it is, but that's just digitizing what you're doing now rather than changing what you're doing. So good to re-examine sort of how you're doing work. The fourth, relying on senior executives to lead the change. So this is something that we saw quite regularly with Yammer, and with Yammer we still sort of maintain that is the way to go with communities and sort of communications, but with Teams it is not the right approach. With Teams, it's really important to have teams who are using Teams in their daily operations, and the role of the executive is really to amplify the good cases and to support rather than lead. If you think about it, actually, this is probably one of the worst places for executives to be the leader, because this is really the place where work gets done and it needs to be treated as such. The final one is around using Teams as an alternative to other applications. People think that they're installing Teams, they're not going to need all these other tools because this is everything all in one. And of course, that seems to be a very attractive proposition to a lot of people. But in fact, both our consultant partners, what we saw in the data, and Microsoft are saying this isn't the right way to think about Teams. It's not an alternative to Yammer. It's not an alternative to SharePoint or OneNote. It's really a hub, and it's a place where you bring these sort of different tools together for employees to get connected to. So look, that's a summary of sort of the key findings from the benchmarking report. And if anyone is interested in discussing with us in the post session after this, or you want to reach out to me or Coco, we'd be happy to talk to you more about it. We'd also be happy to connect you with the author of the report, which is our Chief Data Scientist, Dr. Lawrence Lockley. He'd be very happy to explore some of these in more detail and even potentially compare your organisation to some of these best and worst practices. Coco, back
Thanks,
to you.
Luke.
Foundations.
Thank you, Luke. Can you hear me? Yes, okay.
Yep.
So we have a case study with a company that throughout the years we've been analyzing data for benchmarking reports has done really well both in Yammer and in Teams. And we'd like to show you now what does a good team look like. As Luke mentioned before, we benchmarked over 5,300 teams globally, and this team that we are going to highlight was a top 5 performing team. The company is Real Foundations, as you can see on the screen. They are headquartered in Dallas, Texas, but have offices all over the world. They're not a huge company, only about 400 people globally. But don't let the small size of the company fool you, because Real Foundations knows what they're doing when it comes to tool resource usage. On the screen, you'll see that we've got Naomi Souza. She is Director of Presence and Assets and is based in Dallas, Texas, where they are headquartered in. But the majority of her team is actually based in Chennai, India. You can see a photo of some of the people at Real Foundations in India, and some of those are part of her team. So we just kind of wanted to give you a visual of what kind of Naomi's team looks like. And we're calling Naomi's team the #WhatI'mDoingToday team. And this team has about 15 members, which is a bit bigger than what Dr. Lawrence Lockley recommends based on the research that he's done. And every person on this team starts their day posting on Teams with a hashtag of what I'm doing today. It can be things like, I'm going to do a social media post today, or I'm going to start training on Office 365 today. And this kind of gives the team the ability to see what people are doing. And then at the end of the day, they can see what was finished or how far along each one of them got in their day's work. And if someone didn't finish, then others around the world can kind of piggyback off each other and kind of step up to help with whatever they can do to get the team across the finish line for the day. This also helps with the real transparency within the team. Even though the team is physically in different places around the world, and certainly, of course, different time zones, Naomi knows exactly what every team member or every member in her team is doing for that day. And so they just kind of, it's a way to check out each other and make sure that the things that were dedicated for the day get done. And the way we came across this team was actually through our anonymous benchmarking. We knew it was from Real Foundations because we had the team ID. And Luke mentioned something about that earlier. So we actually went back to Naomi and said, hey, we've got this team that's within your organization and it's a top performing team. And here's the team ID. Can you find out who is the leader of this team or who's in this team? We'd love to be able to sit down and have a conversation with the people on this team, and maybe they can give us a little bit of insights of what has made them such a great team. And so to our surprise and Naomi's surprise, she went in and checked, and when she came back, she says, that's actually my team. And so we were all actually really excited because we were already talking to her. And so then she went on to tell us how they operate. And we thought this was a great story to share just what the importance of best practices are. Luke shared earlier on how in March, the soup customer usage of Microsoft Teams went up by 210%. And that's just in the month of March. Also in March, there was a 70% increase in Yammer usage as well. And then earlier, Luke also touched base just very briefly on the soup team types. And we have these soup team personas, and there's 5 of them. And I'm just going to go over them very quickly. They are on your screen. So we have the self-directed team, the single leader team, and the community of practice, the forum, and then a disconnected team. So if we have anyone listening today, there's a question that I'd like to ask, and maybe you can just use the chat or the live question and answer tool here. And one of the questions is, what do you think would be Naomi's team based on the 5 teams that we have there? What do you think her team is? Is it the self-directed team, the single leader team, community of practice, the forum, or a disconnected team? I'll wait just a little bit to see if we have anyone that wants to kind of jump in and answer that. And okay, so I don't see anyone jumping in. So I will just tell you what it is. So her team is actually a self-directed team. And what a self-directed team is, the members of the team are all connected to each other in a 2-way direction. It's important that you have these 2-way connections at scale, because that's how you build trust. You have a remote self-directed team that, if there is 2-way relationships, trust becomes even more important to them. And this is why this team was rated so highly. So the next slide, once again, the hashtag what I'm doing today team has 15 members. we have so many people, as Luke mentioned earlier, we have so many people and organizations that come to us and they ask, when should we be using Teams and when should we be using Yammer, and do we need them both? And I think that Real Foundations has a very clear picture of when to use Teams and when to use Yammer. And so one of the quotes that we had from Naomi was, "We go to Teams to work." So they go to Teams to do their daily work. It's just like their physical team, whether it's digitally or physically, where they have to do their day-to-day work. And this is not a place where you would probably want, someone like your CEO or your CFO, CIO in there as part of your team. You really want to stick with your team leader, make sure that your team leader is there, and so that you have a defined group of people who you know and who you are working with, so that you can have that productive work environment. And Yammer, on the other hand, is where it's kind of like if you need to step out of what your team is and find the answers to a question, or maybe you need to share some knowledge, or even, make an announcement or things of that nature. And so one of the quotes that we got from Naomi was, Yammer is that virtual water cooler that you go to when you're not quite sure who might benefit from the interaction, or who might have the answer that you're looking for. And one of the things that Naomi also says is, when there's questions like that, there's always someone within your organization that is going to know the answer. So it's really important to be clear on when to use Teams and when to use Yammer, but it's also great to see just how wonderful both Teams and Yammer can work together. So on the right, what we're seeing is a screenshot of what Naomi's team looks like. You'll see just how well connected all those people within her team are. You see the soup team persona that the team has been given based on the interaction between the team members, and you can see that they are a self-directed team. And you're also able to see that by the web on the team network map that you're seeing on the in the middle of the page. One of the really nice things that you're able to see is look at the response rate widget over on the left side of the screen. Just look at the post. The post with replies are 88%. There's a lot of conversations going on this team. You look at the post with likes, right? There's only 3% of the posts that are done don't get a reply or a like. But the other interesting thing about it is that if you look down on the response time, 66% of what's posted has a response within an hour. Just if you think of how remote these teams are that we are beginning to work with and that we're beginning to see globally, it's just it's so nice to be able to know that if you're posting something, someone is always going to be there to be answering your questions, or maybe just to contribute to enhance whatever it is that you are working on throughout the day. So these are widgets that are really important to have a look at. So what we're going to do next is give you just a really brief overview of what Teams, Swoop for Teams looks like. So what you're seeing right now on the screen is just the personal dashboard of what you would see when you go into Swoop for Teams. So on the personal dashboard, you're going to get deep knowledge of what your personal contribution, as well as the performance of your team and the groups that you participate in, and of course across all your organization. You'll be able to see the key statistics of just the type of how many posts you've done, how many replies, the likes, the mentions, and then what has been reciprocated to you. in the goldenrod. We also have SWOOP personas. We have the SWOOP unique personas that we have. And SWOOP uses these unique personas to provide the users insights into what their collaboration style is. And based on what activity you have on the platform is the type of SWOOP persona that you'll have. We have 5. We have the observer. We have the broadcaster, the responder, the catalyst, and then the engager as well. So we tell people aspire to be at least either a responder, a catalyst, or an engager, because these are the people that kind of have it down, right? They're not just going in and posting information, whether it's relevant or irrelevant to what the team is doing. And they're certainly not an observer, because an observer is just someone that, goes in and just kind of reads and, carries on. But a responder, a catalyst, and engager are someone that is actively in there, actively answering questions, actively asking questions, or at mentioning people. You'll also be able, with the metrics that we provide, you'll be able to have actionable insights that empowers the team members to create growth plans for better collaborative behaviors. And we just talked about what the SWOOP persona does and what the network map, just how well connected you are within your organizations. Leaders are able to measure sentiment and track keyword topics as well. We like to say that SWOOP is the fitness tracker. This is why at SWOOP we are so focused on encouraging organizations to democratize SWOOP across their organization. We know that change starts at an individual level, and so we want to be able to provide metrics that will allow each individual to see how they are working in order to change the way that they are working. And so we see some of the metrics that you'll be able to see or pull out of SWOOP is your most active teams. Who are they? What type of interactions are they having? Kind of like the activity trend, did they, start off strong and then all of a sudden, something happened and maybe they're not as active. So it gives you kind of a bird's eye view of what the teams within your organization are doing. One of the really important things to identify is who are your team champions within your organization. Those that are kind of carrying on the conversations, or those that are out there answering the questions, right? So if you're having a campaign or wanting to make sure that a campaign is successful, these are the type of people, or these are the people that you want to go and tap on the shoulder to help with these campaigns. The indexes that indicate health of interactions are, we would consider the curiosity index and that mention index. There is no better way for you to bring someone into a conversation than by mentioning someone. Our studies have shown that you're 73% more likely to get a response on a post when you mention someone than when you don't. So this is a way just to pull someone into the conversation and say, hey, what do you think? I want your input, or, whatever it is that you might want to mention them for. Curiosity index, how are questions being asked? And one of the easiest ways to get opinions, and of course a diversity of opinions, is by asking questions. And again, our SWOOP's research has found that when you ask a question, you are 150% more likely, 150% times more likely to get a response when you ask a question than when you don't. One of the really important metrics is understanding your team. So if your aspiration is to be a self-directed team, or maybe a single leader team, depending on how your organization works, we give you the metrics to understand exactly what it is, what your team is doing. So if you are a disconnected team, or you are a team with just a forum or a community of practice, but that's not what you aspire to be, we kind of give you the metrics to see exactly how it is that your team is connected, and perhaps changes that based on those metrics, maybe your team can make changes to, hopefully be on the way to become the team that you aspire to be. We have give you metrics as far as the key player dependency. How dependent is your team to either a certain person, or just like a cluster or a group of people? If those people were to leave the team, what is the probability of that team continuing to thrive? So you want to make sure that the balance is spread out across the team. You can see the team connectivity. How well connected is the team across, people across the team? You can see the, how much of two-way relationships do you have on the team? How strong are those relationships? So these are key indicators that will help you understand who your team is, and how you can, if you're not the team that you would like to be, what you can do to become the aspirational team. Anything else, Luke, that you think maybe you can add to what we've just talked about?
No, I think that that was excellent. I know we're coming up on time, so I wanted to make sure that I put up this QR code for a couple of seconds while we wrap up. This is where you can get a copy of the benchmarking report for Yammer Teams Workplace if you're into that. It is available for free. You just need to go in and click on the link and you'll get a copy. And you'll find the very comprehensive sort of detailed study that we completed, give you some insight into how your team is performing in Teams. And if you'd like us to help you do a more sort of focused benchmarking study, we do offer a free trial of Swoop, and we'd be happy to look at your data next to the benchmarking data. So let's see. I think there was a question, but I can't see it because I'm.
Yeah, there is a question. Coco is answering it.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah. Well, we have a few minutes, so I'll ask, and then maybe you can share something. In our tenant, there are lots of group chats and file sharing, which should be happening in Teams. How do you help direct users to this when they are first introduced to Teams? So I think to answer your question is, I think it's really important that individuals are able to see kind of what their collaboration style is, what they're doing, and giving them the ability to see how they're working with the metrics that Sue provides, and how the team is working. Being able to see those two, I think, should be able to help individuals as far as moving them away from the chats and into maybe moving a lot of the collaboration stuff into the channels. Luke?
Yeah, I think that's great. Okay, well, thanks for joining. We are going to be over in the post-session networking group. If anyone's got any more questions, we'd be happy to answer them. Thanks, Randy, for having us.
Thank you very much. I've posted a link to the survey in the announcement, and I've also posted a link to the post-session breakout room. Go Teams fans, goteams.fans BRK352. Thanks very much. Have a great evening. Good morning. Good night. Yeah.
Bye-bye.